You know, I've met a lot of powerful women in my life, strong women, faithful women, women who carried whole families on their backs when the world gave them nothing. But when I opened the Quran and read about Mary, the mother of Jesus, man, I had to put that book down for a second, because this woman right here, she wasn't just strong, she was chosen. Now, let me tell you something. In a book filled with prophets, kings, angels, and miracles, there's only one woman who got a whole chapter named after her, Marion Young. That right there ought to tell you something. And this ain't no side character. This ain't no background story. This is a woman whose name is mentioned more times in the Quran than the name of Prophet Muhammad himself. And I said, hold up now. God must be trying to tell us something through this lady. See, Maryam's story don't start with a crown or a throne. It starts with prayer. It starts with sacrifice. It starts with her mama praying, saying, Lord, I dedicate this child in my womb to you. Man, can you imagine that? Before Maryam was even born, she was already wrapped in intention. She was born into purpose. Now, that right there made me stop, because I started thinking, how many of us actually dedicate our blessings to God before we even receive them? We pray for success, but we don't say, Lord, I'll use it for you. Mayam's whole life started from a prayer like that. She grew up pure, disciplined, worshiping day and night in the temple. No distractions, no vanity, just her and her Creator. And man, that kind of devotion hits different, because in today's world, people get nervous if they can't check their phone for 10 minutes. Mayam was out here spending her youth in silence and worship and remembrance, but then comes the real test. And see, that's how God works. He don't give big tests to small souls. He gives them to the ones he knows can handle them. One day, an angel appears to Maryam. Now, let me pause right there. If an angel showed up in my house, I'm telling you right now, I'm hitting the floor, Tony. Robbins would have been speaking in tongues before the angel even said hello. But Maryam, she stood firm. The angel tells her, God has chosen you, purified you, and chosen you above all the women of the world. And right then I got chills, because you got to understand, she's a young woman, all alone, no husband, no power, no status. And God tells her she's chosen above all women. That's the kind of elevation no human can give you. That's divine appointment. But then the angel says something that would shake any human soul. You will conceive a son. And she says, how can I have a son when no man has touched me? That's the part that gets me every time. Her innocence, her confusion, her honesty. And the angel replies, it is easy for your Lord. When he decrees a thing, he only says to it, be, and it is. Man, that right there, that's power. That's the moment you realize God. Don't operate on human rules. And you know what I thought when I read that? I said, that's what faith looks like. Faith is when life tells you impossible and God tells you, watch me. Maryam had every reason to doubt, every reason to panic, because she knew what her people would think. An unmarried woman suddenly expecting a child in that culture, that was a death sentence. But she didn't argue. She didn't run. She submitted. That's faith. That's courage. And I started thinking about my own life. How many times God told me to do something that didn't make sense, and I tried to reason my way out of it. Maryam didn't reason. She trusted. She trusted when her reputation was on the line. She trusted when her heart was breaking. She trusted when she was all alone. And maybe that's why God made her the woman who would carry the miracle of Jesus, because he needed someone who could carry faith heavier than the world's judgment. When I picture her, this young woman walking alone, belly heavy, with a baby nobody believed in, I see the very definition of strength. The Quran says she withdrew to a far place to give birth. No midwife, no husband, no comfort, just her and God. And when the pains came, she cried out, oh, I wish I had died before this. And man, I felt that line. That's not weakness, that's humanity. Even the strongest faith can have a moment of breaking. And that's when God spoke to her. Do not grieve, your Lord has provided a stream beneath you, and shake the trunk of the palm tree towards you, fresh dates will fall upon you. Now, I don't know if y'all ever seen a palm tree, but that thing ain't moving. You can't just shake a palm tree and expect dates to fall. But that's how God works. He'll ask you to move even when what you're moving don't make sense. You do your part, he does his. You pull the trunk, he drops the fruit. That's faith in motion. And right there, That scene, Maryam crying, sweating, exhausted, but still moving, that's one of the most powerful pictures of womanhood I've ever seen. Because it ain't about glamour. It's about grace under pressure. It's about trusting when your world's falling apart. When she finally gives birth, she holds that baby, and you know she got to face her people. Now imagine that moment. She walks back to town holding the child in her arms, and they look at her like, Maryam, what have you? And she don't even speak. The Quran says she pointed to the baby, and that baby, Jesus, peace be upon him, spoke in the cradle and said, I am the servant of God. He has given me the book and made me a prophet. Man, I read that part out loud and just sat there because that's the moment. Everything turned. The moment the truth spoke for itself, Maryam didn't have to defend herself. Her miracle did it for her. That's when I realized something deep. Y'all, when you live right, when you keep your faith, when you trust God, you ain't got to prove yourself to nobody. God will speak for you in ways the world can't deny. That's Maryam's legacy. That's why she's the most honored woman in the Quran. Not because she was loud or famous or perfect, but because she was faithful even when the whole world doubted her. And maybe that's what the message really is. That power ain't in control. Power is in surrender. Power is in trusting God when everything else falls apart. Maryam didn't just carry a baby. She carried a message that God's promise is bigger than your pain. Now, when I sat down after reading Maryam's story, I couldn't move for a while because it hit me that this story ain't just about a woman who gave birth to a prophet. It's about what it means to hold on to your dignity when the world's trying to tear it apart. See, we live in a world now that'll judge you in a heartbeat. You make one mistake, one rumor gets out, one picture, one misunderstanding, and boom, people label you for life. But Maryam's story, it's like God saying, I see the truth even when they don't. I honor you even when they mock you. And I thought, man, that's mercy. You know, we got this problem today. People equate faith with weakness. Like if you cover up, you old-fashioned. If you say, I don't do that, you boring. If you choose purity, you're missing out. But Maryam's life flipped that whole script. She showed that modesty ain't weakness, it's strength. She showed that obedience to God ain't submission to the world, it's freedom from the world. And I'm going to tell you something that hit home for me because I remember when I was younger chasing money, fame, success. I thought that's where power was. Then I read this story about a woman who had none of that, and yet she's remembered forever. Why? Because her power came from the inside. There's this verse in the Quran that says, and remember Mary who guarded her chastity, and we breathed into her of our spirit, and she believed in the words of her Lord and his scriptures and was of the devoutly obedient. Now let me tell you something. That's the blueprint for greatness. That's not just for women. That's for everybody. Faith, self-control, obedience, devotion. That's what makes somebody powerful in God's eyes. Not followers, not fame, not status. And you know what I love? The Quran don't describe Maryam as perfect. It shows her crying. It shows her afraid. It shows her breaking down. That's what makes her so real. She had emotions. She had doubts. She had pain, but she didn't quit. That's what makes her powerful. And I think that's why her story still hits so hard even 1,400 years later. Because no matter where you're from, you've been through that moment. That moment. When you feel alone, when people misunderstand you, when you cry to God like, Lord, I can't do this no more. And then somehow, right when you're about to break, you feel something, a little strength, a little peace, a little push. That's God whispering, shake the trunk, I'll make the dates fall. That line right there, I think about it every time life gets heavy. Because sometimes all God wants you to do is move. Take one step, one prayer, one act of faith, he'll handle the rest. Maryam didn't sit there and complain, Lord, this tree too strong, I can't shake it. She moved, and that's when the miracle came. So when I'm out here facing life's problems, when things don't make sense, I remind myself, Tony Robbins, don't complain. Shake the trunk. And man, I gotta say, this story changed how I look at women because Maryam represents a strength that don't make headlines, but makes history. She didn't lead armies. She didn't sit on a throne, but she led hearts to God just by being faithful. And in today's world, where everybody trying to go viral, trying to be seen, trying to prove something, Maryam's story is like God whispering, you don't have to be loud to be legendary. Now, let me tell y'all something funny. When I told my wife I was reading about Maryam, she looked at me like, Tony Robbins, you're finally reading something good. And I said, baby, this woman right here makes every motivational speaker look small because she ain't talk about grinding or hustling. She lives surrendered. She didn't chase success. She trusted purpose. And look where it got her honored by Jews, Christians, and Muslims all over the world. Ain't nobody else got that. Now here's something else that really humbled me. When Maryam was accused, when people pointed fingers, gossip, whisper, she didn't argue. She didn't post no defense. She just pointed. And that baby spoke for her. You know what that taught me? Silence can be power. You ain't always got to clap back. You ain't always got to explain yourself. When your connection with God is strong, he'll send your vindication in ways you could never plan. I remember one time I was going through a rough season, people talking, newspapers twisting things, social media lighting up, and I kept thinking, Lord, I can't fix this. Then I remembered Maryam and I said, okay, Tony Robbins, let God speak for you. And he did. He always does. That's what I think God loved about Maryam. She didn't try to control the narrative. She let God write it. And you know what else the Quran calls her? Siddiqa, the truthful one. That means she was real, authentic, no masks, no pretending. That's another lesson we need today, because social media turned people into actors in their own lives. Everybody fake and happy, fake and humble, fake and holy, but Maryam was real in her faith. She ain't performing, she lived it. And that's why she's honored, because truth don't need decoration. It shines on its own. Every time I read her name in that book, I feel a sense of calm, like God is saying, don't worry about what they call you. I know who you are. And if that's not peace, I don't know what is. You know, the more I think about Maryam, the more I realize this story ain't just from the past. It's not a bedtime story. It's a mirror. See, God didn't put her story in his book so we could say, wow, what a woman. He put it there so we'd ask, what kind of person am I? Because every one of us, man or woman, we got a little bit of Maryam's struggle in us. That moment when we feel isolated. That moment when we don't understand God's plan. That moment when faith is the only thing holding us together. That's the Maryam moment, when she stood under that tree crying, exhausted, and God said, do not grieve. That wasn't just for her. That was for everybody who ever broke down in silence. Everybody who ever felt unseen, unappreciated, unloved. God was saying, I see you. I've got you. Shake the trunk. Your blessings are coming. Man, that's some powerful comfort right there. And that's when I realized something. Maryam's story ain't just about a mother. It's about faith under fire. You see, faith don't mean you never cry. Faith means you keep believing while you cry. It means you keep walking even when your legs tremble. And that's why I think the Quran gives her such high honor, because she showed us what it looks like to be faithful and human at the same time. Now, let me talk to my brothers for a second. Men, listen. Maryam's story teaches us too. See, a real man don't look down on a faithful woman. He looks up to her. Because the strength it takes to be pure, to be patient, to stand alone when the world mocks you, that's divine strength. And brothers, we need to start respecting that, not objectifying it, not mocking it, not calling modesty old-fashioned, because in truth, it's the most revolutionary thing left in this crazy world. And to the women listening, I don't care who you are, how far you feel from God, what your past looked like. If he could honor Maryam, he can raise you up too. You might feel like your reputation's damaged. You might think you ain't worthy. You might feel like nobody understands you, but you got to remember, God understands you. Maryam didn't become honored because the world clapped for her. She became honored because God chose her. And if he could choose her poor, alone, misunderstood, then he can choose you right where you are. You know, I used to think being chosen meant you'd have it easy. That if God's with you, you'd be cruising through life like everything's fine. I'm blessed, but Maryam taught me something different. When you're chosen, it's not comfort you get, it's purpose. And purpose is heavy. Purpose will make you cry sometimes. Purpose will make you question yourself. But if you stay faithful through that, God will use your pain to lift other people. That's why her story is eternal, because every generation needs a reminder of what real strength looks like. And it ain't loud, it ain't angry, it ain't trying to impress nobody. It's quiet, it's sacred. It's between you and God. That's the kind of power that lasts forever. Now let me tell you the part that really broke me in the Quran. God defends Maryam himself. He literally reveals verses that clear her name. You know how rare that is? God himself stepped in to say, this woman is pure. Man, when I read that, I teared up, because that's love. That's divine protection. That's God saying, when the world talks about you, I talk for, and I said, Lord, please defend me like that when I can't defend myself. You know what else? Every time Muslims mention Jesus, they call him Isa ibn Maryam, Jesus, son of Mary. Think about that. They honor the mother every single time they honor the son. Now that's respect. That's legacy. That's the kind of reverence the world forgot how to give. And I sat there thinking, man, how many of us honor our mothers like that anymore? How many of us remember the women who raised us, cried for us, sacrificed for us? Maybe that's what God's reminding us through Maryam. You can't separate greatness from gratitude. And I'll be real with y'all. This story changed the way I talk to God. See, I used to pray with conditions like, Lord, if you fix this, I'll be good. Lord, if you bless me, I'll be thankful. But Maryam didn't pray like that. She said, here I am, Lord. No. Conditions, just surrender. And that's the real power of her story. Faith without fine print. Now, look, I ain't Muslim, but I can tell you this, the Quran's story of Maryam gave me a whole new level of respect for Islam because it reminded me of something I think all believers forget sometimes, that purity still matters, that patience still matters, that surrender still matters. It don't make you weak, it makes you trusted. And that's exactly what Maryam was, trusted by God with a miracle. So whenever I see a woman trying to live right in this wild, loud world, I see a little bit of Maryam in her. Whenever I see somebody keeping faith when everyone else gave up, that's Maryam's legacy, brethren. It's in every mother raising her kids with faith, every woman saying, I'm waiting for the right man, every soul that chooses prayer over popularity. That's what it means to be powerful in God's eyes. And so now, whenever I read her name, I don't just think of a woman from 2,000 years ago. I think of every person still standing, still believing, still fighting quietly with grace. That's the real miracle, not the baby she carried, but the faith that carried her. If you ever doubt your worth, if you ever feel like the world don't see you, remember Maryam, because God saw her when nobody else did. And that means he sees you too. And I don't care what you're facing right now. If he could turn her tears into triumph, he can do the same for you. That's the promise of the same God who said, be, and it was. So yeah, Maryam might be called the most powerful woman in the Quran, but to me, she's the definition of faith itself.